My name is Dave Engen. I'm a pharmacist, clinical pharmacist care manager over at Health Plans, although I've been in the Samaritan Health System for 9 years, so I think Athena's beaten me by a little bit. But it's great to be with you today. Actually, originally I'm a teacher, high school science teacher, and pharmacy is actually a second profession, so it's great to get up in front of you guys and spend a little time talking about my favorite topic, food and drugs. Okay, so we'll have a good time here. We'll have some chance for questions and things like that. And of course, I'm going to hang out and we'll make sure that you get all those burning questions answered. And I have some resources for you that we'll talk about in a little while too. So anyway, without further ado, let's move on. So medications. So many Americans on so many medications. Seems like we have a medication for just about everything. In fact, we have medications that treat the side effects of medications now. So, but we know that a lot of these medications are definitely necessary, and they're not only improving our quality of life, but they're keeping us living. So we want to talk about some of the aspects of medications, though, that can be problematic if you're not aware. And one of those things is how medications and food interact with one another. So I'm sure you've been at the pharmacy and you get handed a bottle of pills, and the pharmacist goes over some of the stuff you see on the side of the bottle, take with food. And you go, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But really what I want to do by the end of the time, I want you to just be aware that when those labels are put on the bottle, they're not haphazardly slapped on there. They're there for a definite purpose and reason. So we've got medications to help us out. And although, if you can read that. So, you know, and I happen to have one of those here if we wanted. We won't do that right now, but nonetheless, so your physician will, of course, prescribe the medication, make sure that you have the right dose and it's appropriate for the condition that's being treated. In your pharmacist goes through and does the quality check and makes sure that everything's safe for you when they fill it. So you kind of figure it's great, okay, good to go. Well, not exactly. You just have to make sure that you're aware. Just because a medication is FDA approved, or maybe you can just go and get it because it's on the shelf. A lot of these medications that have been FDA approved eventually make their way to the over-the-counter status, and you figure, hey, it's safe. You can get it easily, but I think you realize that there's still potential dangers if you misuse those medications, and most of the time it's unintentional. So never fear. A little bit of knowledge can be some power. So let's take a look at medication safety. Now we know that you know, as we age, we tend to be put on some additional medications, and that could be for a variety of reasons. But nonetheless, you know, we want to know that our bodies just, I don't know, this is probably a news flash, but as we age, it doesn't quite work the way it used to. I don't know about you, but I mean, maybe you're different. But I notice a big difference when I go into the weight room and throw those weights around. Yeah, not happening quite the way that it did when I was in my 20s. So more of a recovery period. So we need to be aware of that with medications as well. So I put up here, there are a bunch of different factors that we need to be aware of. And of course, age is one of those. When we have differences in medications, differences in the way that they work in our body, it can be attributed to different things, like whether just you're male or female. your body structure, if you're rail thin, or if you are a little bit, maybe a little bit on the heavier side. They're going to have differences in your body and how they work. Medical issues, as we age, we get more medical issues, and more cases than not. And then, like I said, the amount of medications that we actually take are increased. So some natural body changes, as we know, we absorb nutrients differently, and sometimes it can be, even how fast and how much and to what extent. So physical changes and physiological changes. So sometimes it gets harder to swallow. Sometimes, as we age, it's natural that you produce less stomach acid. So you're going to have differences in the amounts of, or the extent of, drug absorption. So we'll talk more about that, how it relates to drugs in a little bit. But also, have up here, age also affects how the body moves those nutrients around. So in your circulatory system, there can be, some more issues. You've got different compositions, so your blood and body water changes. You are probably aware, maybe the amount of muscle is a little bit less than, as I talked about, a little bit less than what you're used to, as in maybe your younger years. The amount of the balance between the fat and muscle, you get maybe a little more fat, and that can have a big effect on how things are absorbed in your body. So just to kind of go along with what I've said, when we process our nutrients, it's going to be a little bit slower. How you clear out stuff. So whether it's medications or just different components of the food, once they're broken down, they have to be eliminated somehow. And most of the time, it's those components are eliminated through kidney, and our kidney function as we age, if we compare it to, say, when you were in your younger years, it can be reduced up to 50% or more, and we need to be aware of that with our medications, that what's tested in the general population may not always be appropriate for elderly or older folks, so we got to be aware of that. So less blood flow and reduced function. So a lot of the things that I've been telling you, you're kind of aware of already. So we'll get more into the actual food and drug interactions here in a minute, but we just have to be cautious. So that's the main. Now hopefully you don't take your medications like that, but nonetheless. So food has a big effect, as I've said, on how these drugs actually enter your system. It can actually delay the amount of absorption of drugs, depending on whether you have food in your stomach. How it's used can also be affected by food, and then it's your body's ability to get that drug out. You don't want that drug constantly circulating at various levels throughout time. There's a time period where the drug is working the way that it should, and then your body starts to break it down, and then you need to get rid of that. And then it's time for a new dose. So depending on the drug, so you got to get it out of your system somehow. So food can actually affect that. So back up here. So here's some things about food and drug interactions. So can prevent, as I've said, a medication from working as it should. Side effects that we'll talk about in a minute, they can actually get better or worse with food. So you got to be aware of that when you're taking your medication, and it may even cause a new side effect. So let's look at, we think about food as just being solid food, but you got to remember juices, caffeine, and alcohol. They can also significantly affect how your drug is going to, how your medication is going to work for you or not. So you got to be aware of those possible dangers and make better decisions, unlike that person. You know, I see that, and for some reason, I mean, it's impressive, yet it's not. I kind of think, does that person have a death wish? I don't see any ropes or anything there. Don't try that at home, okay? All right. So medications and food. Now you may think, okay, my body's not responding the way that it should. Is this a drug-food interaction, or is it just a side effect of that medication? And so just some typical, well, I shouldn't say typical, but some medication side effects. You're going to have maybe taste and smell changes. Your stomach can be affected by medications. Your appetite, so it can either, sometimes it can increase your appetite, sometimes it just makes you feel like you don't want to eat at all. Changes in body chemistry, and of course, in serious, the most serious aspect would be organ damage. So when you throw food in the mix, sometimes that can actually magnify those issues. So here are some of the drug classes. Now, of course, in my limited time, I don't have, of course, there's about 1,800 drugs out there on the market right now. So a dizzying amount of drugs, and every year there's dozens more added, and so we have to be on top of things. And so it can be quite a challenge with all the information that's out there and misinformation. So here are a bunch of the drug classes that you may or may not be, you may be familiar with more of these than maybe you even think. But so let's look at one of those. So pain relievers. Talked about some of those aches and pains creeping up. So ibuprofen and aspirin and those kinds of things, even Tylenol would fit into that general category, although there's very large differences among them and how they work. So I have on here that a lot of these, they can really affect that stomach lining. In fact, like ibuprofen and those, they're called non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, so NSAIDs, you probably hear that. They affect prostaglandin synthesis, and that's a protective layer in your stomach that helps keep problems from occurring. So you've got these drugs that actually, as they inhibit that, that helps with inflammation, but it can also affect your stomach lining. So we've got to be careful with that. And that's why they say take these with food, so you get the stomach protection when you take these medications. Now, is that necessarily true with, let's say, Tylenol? Well, Tylenol's in a different subclass of those pain relievers, so it doesn't work the same way, and it doesn't really work on inflammation, but it will work for pain. So, but I did put on there, just avoid alcohol in general anytime around those, especially if you drink more than a couple drinks per day. You got to keep your liver healthy, and that's how these drugs are cleared, so make sure that you're aware of that for pain relievers. So stomach acid blockers, antacids. I kind of group Zantac and Prilosec, and sometimes you'll hear me use brand terms. I'm not promoting any of these brands. They're just ones that you're probably familiar with. So, but you've got some different products out there that'll help with your stomach and with that reflux and things like that. That burning sensation, heartburn, that sensation that you have kind of in your throat sometimes. Although these products are good, you have to be aware that the way that they work can cause some other issues. And so when you put food into the mix there, you need to be aware at least that it can affect nutrients, and it can also affect your ability to absorb those nutrients from food. So kind of threw this in here because it was just interesting that somebody brought up B12. And I did want to point out here that long-term use of some of these products have been shown to hinder B12 absorption. So you want to make sure that most of these drugs you don't need to be on for really a super long time unless your physician feels the need to keep this ongoing. So if you're self-treating and maybe you want to talk to your physician about possibly having a holiday and see how you respond to that. Because the long-term effects of, say, proton pump inhibitors, which are a class of stomach acid blockers, that can also, the research has shown that it's been linked with higher incidence of osteoporosis or fractures, I should say, and so you want to just make sure that you're aware that these medications do have effects other than what's necessarily intended. So keep that in mind. Antibiotics. So you know that they're used to treat infections and not viral infections. And you also know that as it kills the bacteria, you also have good bacteria in your gut, and lactobacillus and those kinds of things that are in your gut that actually produce vitamins for you. They can also be affected by antibiotics. So you want to make sure if you're on long-term antibiotic therapy beyond 10 days, that discuss with your physician about the need for maybe some probiotics. And I know Athena mentioned Nancy's yogurt. That's full of good probiotics. In fact, Greek yogurt most of those brands are a great way to increase your probiotic concentrations in your body. So be aware of that, and if you're on long-term antibiotics, to take care of your health there. So anticoagulants, your blood thinners. We'll focus in on warfarin, and if any of you are on warfarin or know someone that's on warfarin, it's a pretty big deal because there's just so many things you need to think about as far as drug interactions. And the main one that we tend to discuss is the fact that you don't want to eat large amounts of food or big fluctuations of food that are rich in vitamin K, because what you're trying to do with warfarin is you're trying to keep those clots from forming too quickly, and so it inhibits vitamin K, and it helps so you don't get those potential blockage in your vessels that could lead to maybe a stroke or a heart attack. And so yeah, you want to make sure that you're consistent in your diet, and that's the whole thing with warfarin. If you're used to eating lots of leafy green vegetables, your dose can be adjusted appropriately for that, but you don't want to all of a sudden one night go to the salad bar and have a huge buffet of all this salad, and then you don't eat leafy greens again for a month. That's going to really cause some major changes in the amount of warfarin that's working in your body, and then it could end up with some serious problems. So think about that. Even today, kale is actually really high in vitamin K. So just be aware, don't overdo it. Okay, but those are the kinds of things. Why do I have that? I love my rat poison. Well, yeah, if you don't know, warfarin actually is the same component that at least was for a long time in rat poison. They found out that, hey, this actually, the way that it works, it can be used for a drug target as well. So yeah, it's a good conversation piece. They even sell T-shirts. I love my rat poison, and it's a good conversation starter. So blood pressure reducers, I could go on and on with these, and there's just so many different classes. But just know, things like beta blockers, metoprolol is a pretty popular one. That one you'd want to take with food. That will help with the good absorption. Calcium channel blockers, I've named a few. There's a big thing about grapefruits, and some of you go, why do they always talk about grapefruits on my medication? Well, grapefruit and the juice of grapefruit can affect enzymes in your liver that help clear out the drug. So if it affects the enzymes that help clear out the drug, then you're going to get high levels of drug in your system, higher than what you would want. And then you could have those adverse effects. So how much grapefruit is okay? There's just so many different studies. They say you can have up to a quart, but if you're not really that into grapefruit, it's better to just, I would say, avoid it and find something else. If you have to have your grapefruit, I have to have my grapefruit every single day, then discuss that with your physician and make sure that you're aware that if you overdo it, you could have some issues. So we'll talk about with the cholesterol medications that tends to be come up a lot as well. Bronchodilators, just be aware that caffeinated products can kind of work against the effects that you're trying to accomplish with that. So it will, increase the side effects. So just be aware. Gosh, you mean I can't drink my coffee if I'm not saying that. I'm just saying just be aware if you overdo it on the coffee and you happen to have asthma or COPD and you're using bronchodilators such as albuterol, that it could increase your chances of being jittery, nervous, and could increase your heart rate, and which eventually could be a problem. So a lot of coulds in there, but nonetheless something to be aware of. And the last thing, I believe, cholesterol, and we talked a little bit about this, and I won't belabor it. Athena did a nice job on that with cholesterol and the need to stay on top of your cholesterol levels. You get tested, fairly routinely for that, depending on your situation. But statins are the most common to treat those, and about half of the statins do have that grapefruit interaction that you need to be aware of, and I listed those up there for you. So Lipitor, Zocor, and Mevacor, which is lovastatin. So be aware of that. And sometimes people go, well, when do I take it? Can I take it anytime during the day? Some of them you can. Some of them you want to take it in the evening, because that's when most of your cholesterol is produced. But depending on who you talk to these days, they may be. We'll see with the newer recommendations. But as it stands right now, it's recommended that take it at night, and some of these with an evening meal, such as lovastatin, would be great. I do have some additional resources for you, and I want to make sure that you're aware of that. And I'm going to leave these on the table, and what they are is I went through and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get to everybody's burning drug question. So I took I kind of pointed out some of the major drug classes and some of the more significant interaction. I put them on a drug table for you. And I also prepared a list of resources. I don't know how many of you like to poke around online and surf the web a little bit, see what's out there, in between emailing your friends. But I have a list of helpful websites. There's just so much junk on the internet right now that it's hard to sort through what's really reputable and what really is truthful. And these sites that I have on here, I've made sure that they have good science back behind it. So you're welcome to I've made enough copies for each person to take one. So if you'd like to take one, feel free. On the other side is I did a talk last year about this time, and I talked about mobile apps, so your smartphones and things like that. There's a variety of apps that you can add to a mobile phone or a tablet, and but they're also websites, and you might find some of those useful. In fact, there was a lady that came up at the break-in was talking about how she'd love to get more information on like Mediterranean diets. So All Recipes is kind of a neat site because they'll help you build a menu based on your likes, and they'll actually tell you, all the content of, the nutritional content of the food and how many calories and all that kind of stuff. So it's really a useful site, and they're not paying me any money. I'm just saying, that's a pretty neat site to poke around on. And there's stuff with exercise, stuff a little more geared toward senior health and that type of thing. So I want to make sure that you have that. And GoodRx is kind of neat if sometimes you go and buy your medications with cash at one of these grocery stores around. This will actually price it out, and it'll show you in the area which have the best prices for the medication if you're paying cash for those. So just thought I'd let you know. And so I'll have these available for you. And I think I have a few minutes for questions, but like I said, I'm going to hang out, and it's usually easier to talk one-on-one, but I'd be glad to take a couple questions right now. Yeah. Yeah, usually metformin, as long as you're taking it, some of those are a long-acting version of metformin, but yes, with the evening meals should be fine with metformin. The main thing with food is that can kind of upset your stomach, and it tends to make people think that it's an adverse drug reaction and they can't tolerate metformin, but usually those are self-limiting, and after a while, those effects wear off. So yeah, that should be fine, unless if your doctor says otherwise. Mostly for metformin, the reason that you'd want to take it with food is for that stomach upset. But if you're not experiencing that, it's much better that you actually take the drug than not. It probably wouldn't hurt. It's just when you're just make sure it's at a time that's consistent, that you can remember, because that's what tends to happen with people is they change up their regimen, and you have so many things going on that if you don't have a consistent time when you do that, I mean, we're all human, we forget. And that's when the problem starts. You forget one day, and then the next day, and then pretty soon it's like you don't even. Yeah, and I surely wasn't trying to promote the use of NSAIDs. In fact, as we age, it's a little more sensitive issue. And yeah, there's more and more research coming out that it's best if you can avoid the ibuprofen type. The Tylenol, as long as you keep it on that lower end of, it used to be 4 grams a day, but now they're saying 3 grams a day for older. That's usually a little bit safer. So it depends on the condition. Unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot of medications out there that can treat the inflammation. So sometimes you're better off with there's certain ones that are maybe a little bit, depending on the condition, a little bit better choice than others. So I can talk to you personally after about maybe what you're using it for. Yeah, I mean, opiates in general, there's not good evidence for long-term benefit of those. Short-term, and once again, as we age, they're just the addiction potential and the fact that it just has more negative issues than not. So I would suggest short-term, if at all possible, has evidence that it can be helpful for certain conditions, but long-term use, they're actually, you know, they're saying there's really, the research is coming out, there's really not good long-term evidence of that being good for your body. So yeah, hydrocodone included. Oh, that would, yeah, it just totally depends on the drug. Sometimes certain medications it'll say you need to take with a high-fat meal. So you need to be aware of that if your drug, you know, happens to say that. But in general, you want to have some, usually it's because you want to have food in your stomach to help create that a little bit of acid so it can absorb properly eventually into your body once it gets to the intestines, break down. You know, I don't see why that would be a bad idea. You've got a, that would as long as you don't put too much butter, I think it would be fine. So, and I need to, this will be the last question. Go ahead, ma'am. Yeah, now, you know, there's a lot going on behind the pharmacy counter, a lot more than you think. You know, there's interactions being checked. The computer helps out with that, but the pharmacists are trained as well to kind of look at the big picture and see what's really clinically significant and what's not. So yes, and most computer systems will screen for that. That's why it's really important to make sure that you tell your pharmacist all the drugs that you're taking, whether you're getting them from one pharmacy or different pharmacies, and over-the-counter medications, and then any other conditions that might be useful for the pharmacist to be able to make a good decision on that. But that is a good question, and you know, we are trained as pharmacists to not just rely on the computer system, but although it's a great tool to help make sure that medications are safely distributed. Thank you so much for that plug, and that's a great one. In fact, I have on here as a resource a place where you can create your own personal medication list and print it out. And that would be something you can take with you to the physician and pharmacy to make sure that they're aware. So I'm going to, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, do you mind if I catch you at the break? And then, because we need to let Jonathan start here. So I'd like to introduce as our next speaker, Jonathan Barthel. Did I pronounce that right? And so he's going to discuss to you. Now, Jonathan is an occupational therapist, and he's got special certification in hand therapy, and he'll talk to you more about how different aspects of movement that you can incorporate into your daily life to really keep you healthy. And so I thank Jonathan for coming, and we'll get him set up here, and it'll just be a minute while we do that. So thank you very much for letting me speak to you.